Let's get started. So beginning with our classic Taijiiquan warm-ups, the hands on the head and the feet together. We're going to start by moving our hips around in a great big circle. And notice how my head is counterbalancing the movement of my waist. Do 20 in each direction, starting with 1. Let the weight roll naturally from foot to foot. 2 more. Okay, and changing directions. First couple nice and slow. Big, even circle. The hips leading the way, the body counterbalancing as they roll. Relax the knees. Relax the quad, the yow, the hips in the back. All right, slightly wider stance. This one here, we're going to rotate the pelvis back. As the pelvis rotates back posterior, the body is going to roll down. Pelvis rotates up, body comes up, the hips are leading the way. So 1, and continue. You want more of a challenge? You bring the hands to the center of the chest. Still focusing on those hips. If you can maintain this without losing posture, bring the hands behind the ears. Back straight. Two more. Okay, bring those in a little bit. Next one, same basic principle, the hips rotating back to forward. As I sink down, hips roll back. As I raise up, the hips come forward, the chest and belly expand as I drop down. All right, sinking and lifting. Try to keep that back straight as you go down, back arcs as you come up. Hands sink down, raising from the hips, expanding with the chest. Keep the focus on that posture. And last one. Okay, slightly wider stance again. Back drops down. As I turn my body, I look past my outstretched hand, back to the center, looking past the hand. 1, 2, And now with a swoop. Okay, back to a higher stance. Feet just a bit wider than shoulder width. The mechanic here is the same as that first movement. All we're doing are great big hip circles, but what we're adding in is a body dive width. So the hips are rolling in a great big arc. My body swooshes. Come back and around. I create that space and through, okay? Starting off nice and slow, rolling back, create that space and through. A little bit of bend in both knees. Focusing on that hips, on those hips making a great big circle. And I never want to lock that knee out. Knee always a little bend as I roll through. Two more. And other side. First couple nice and slow. Focus on scribing that circle. Playing with that body roll. Two more. Okay, shake that out for a moment. Find a nice comfortable stance, a bit wider than shoulder width, focusing on one leg, big external rotation. So try to take that hip and draw a great big circle with just this one hip. The circle comes in, rolls around and goes back. In, rolls and back. The first few moments, just play with that shape, try to make it as smooth as you can, as relaxed as you can. From there, adding in our base postural elements, beginning with grabbing the ground with the feet. The toes grip the earth just a little bit to create some more stability and engagement with the lower legs. From there, the umbilicus draws towards the spine, helping that movement traverse up the middle into the upper. And then lastly on this list, the occiput raises towards the ceiling just a little, so that stretch continues up all the way through your structure. If you find that in doing this, you lose your circle, let the postural elements go, return to your circle base, and gradually build them on from there. Again, feet, belly, finally head and neck. And now switching hips, same thing, external rotations. Make sure you're describing that complete arc, in, around, out, and back. In, around, out, and back. Identify the circle first, then gradually, as you're ready, add in those postural qualities, the grab, belly draw, and head neck raise. One more dark. From here, going into a figure eight. Roll the first hip, roll the second. side to side, round to round. Again, just like in the single leg circles, try to create that figure 8 shape first, make it comfortable and make it complete. Round to pull, side to side. Once you have that, add in the foot grab, belly draw, and head neck raise. Work on smoothing it out, even weight transfer from leg to leg. Constant pulling engagement, no leg is ever locked out, no leg is ever absent some amount of drawing power. Good, relax that for a moment. Check out your stance for just a second there. And now back to that very first leg, this time internal rotation. So again, first 2 times through, play with that shape. As you're ready, adding in the foot grab, belly draw, and head neck raise. It's okay if the opposite leg kind of naturally falls into a figure 8, that's not a problem. We just want the focus to be on one leg at a time to make sure our circles are as smooth as they can be. Okay, switching legs. Again, nice and slow for those first couple. Identify the shape. Make the shape as round and smooth as you can. Then foot grab, belly draw, and neck raise. And from here, rolling into that internal rotation, figure 8. So one hip rolls, other hip rolls, the hip draws back and around that circle, rolling side to side. Playing with that movement, trying to get it as relaxed and smooth as you can. Adding in foot grab, belly draw, and head raise as you're comfortable with each. And I really recommend just going one at a time. Do foot grab until foot grab feels really stable and not limiting in terms of the range of motion. Belly draw until that feels comfortable. Just kind of sequentially make the thing that isn't just one big blob of movements, because that can get kind of rough. Okay. Shake that out for a moment. Any questions so far? So far, so good? Hi, Mom.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah.
I think I might be having internal and external rotation. Internal is when the hip is closing in. Correct. And then external is closing out.
Right, and so for the purposes of exercise, let me get a little close to the camera and go sideways so it's easier to see. So a 45-degree angle. For external, I'm going around that big arc, arcing away from myself. And so after I come in, the power is away. The power is away. For internal, I'm drawing in.
Okay.
Does that clarify?
Yeah, were you working on your right leg there?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Let me get a piece of tape so we have tape side and not tape side because that's been working better for everyone. So, because right, left can be tough. Tape side, not tape side. So nextly, any other questions? Okay. Get that timer back. All right, so we're gonna go into our slicing exercise, adding and stepping. But before we add all that together, let's play with what that slice is, all right? That side body view, see how my chest is concave, my back is a little convex. As I raise the arms up, they cut down at a 45-degree angle, shoulder to hip, shoulder to hip. Is that little finger side that leads the movement each time through. And just our hips are scribing a horizontal figure eight. The slicing is a vertical figure eight, okay? So just take a moment and play with this movement. Lift to drop, lift to drop. We'll add the hips in just a second. Keep playing with that. Very nice, Drew. The bottom hand pulls the top hand. Good, Caro. Keep spacing those armpits. Very nice, Lake and Laura. Very good, April. Good, Mom. And Galen, try to make sure those hands are staying together. So as one rises, drop, drop. Both hands drawing together. Like we have a limb and we're just rolling through the arm bar. Very nice. Okay, so everyone's hands seem pretty on point. Let's start playing with the hips. Okay, so before we bring the arms in next, just put the hands on top of your hips and go back to internal rotation. And again, internal rotation is that around to in, around to in. And as we roll with that, feel the change in height as the hand completes a complete circle. As tape side comes around, there's a bit of a lift as I pass that arc and come forward. Now in non-tape side, there's a lift. In just a moment, I'm going to utilize that lift as the trigger, which raises my arms up and preloads me for that slice down. So a few more seconds, just play with that roll, feel that lift. Very nice. No need to exaggerate. Just try to, identify where that is in that rotation. So now, as I roll towards tape side hip comes back. And as that hip lifts, the hip lifts first, the hands follow. I roll to the other side. Now see there's that vacuity, that space right here. That enables my arms to just slice clean right through. I continue that figure eight. Non-tape hip lifts, the hands lift off of it. As I roll back on tape side, the hands draw down. Tape side lifts, hands follow. I create space, hands drop. Hips lift, hands follow. I create space, hands drop. So don't worry about making it smooth yet, just try to feel that quality of lift and have the hands follow that lift as we roll through. Lift first, hands roll off that lift. Keep playing with that for a moment. Good, taking your time with that lift. Very nice, Lake. April, adding a little bit more belly draw will help you to more easily feel the hip lift in your shoulders. Good, Galen. Make sure the hands don't go too far behind your body. So my body turns, there's space. My shoulders are always in line with that concavity in the front. I never break that sphere for the sake of getting more power with the arms. Very good. Very nice, Rachel. Very smooth, Rachel. There you go, Mom. Slightly wider stance, Mom, so you can feel that pull from side to side. Good. Everyone's coming along nicely with this. So real quick, the reason why we don't want the hands and the hips to lift at the same time is because the kind of power we're after isn't that instantaneous one-for-one movement. It's a cascade of events leading towards an acceleration. And so if my hips and hands raise at the same time, I get kind of stuck in the shoulder power model, just dropping my arms fast, but there's no drop of the belly, there's no acceleration from my feet to my hips to my belly into my shoulders and hands. Part of what makes Taiji, Bagua, and Power Tortoise so nifty is they utilize acceleration to kind of deal with the greater strength they might be facing. So as I draw through, the acceleration causes everything to come up, and then that cascade follows through. And as I build the capacity for that kind of power, the most important thing is the coordination to knock it in my own way. I want the movement to seamlessly come from my feet, traverse up my structures, and then draw my hands side to side in this arc. All right, so from the figure eight, we're now going to add in a bit of stepping. So as the hands arc to tape side, the hip rolls and the hands raise. Notice how tape side hip is rolled in a little bit. From here, my other leg is going to step behind, and as I pivot, that leg is going to pull to the ground as I slice on the heel of tape side foot, and then I can immediately go right back in to my figure eights. As I continue in the same direction, the hip lift raises the arms, my body pivots in, I step behind, I turn and slice, and notice how I'm going right into my hip. All I need to do to correct for that is just continue my figure eight roll, my hands clear with no problem. Let's go back the other way a couple times, I'll take a look at all of you. As that non-tape side hip begins to roll and lift, the hands follow, that hip turns in, I step behind, pulling that foot into the ground, pivoting on the heel, and then create that space. Again, the hip lifts first, hands follow, step behind, find the ground, pivot that heel, and continue that internal rotation so I don't get in my own way. So from here, let's relax the arms for a second and play with the footwork for just a minute, okay? So we have that internal rotation. We have the hip lift. The hip turns in, step behind, find the ground, pivot on the heel. And as we come through, this hip clears, back to figure eight.
Joey, are we working one leg at a time?
We're going just in a line across the floor a little bit.
Okay, I'm just wondering, is when we go back to the figure eights, do we keep doing the same?
Oh, it goes right, left, right, left.
Okay.
So it'd be one side, other side, back and forth. Yeah, good question. And so from here right now, we're just playing with the mechanics of that step, right? And so from that coil, there's that lift and turn in. That enables me to step behind. As I turn around, right back to my figure eights. This hip is next. As I turn in, coil and load that hip. Other leg steps behind. That foot finds the ground. As I pivot around and in, it creates space in this hip. Right back to my coil. Once more without hands, I'll bring those hands back in. This hip rolls. As it comes up and over, I step, turn, and continue that roll. One last time, I'll take a look at all of you. This hip rolls to lift. I step with that lift, pivoting, continuing that roll. Okay, everyone give that a try for a second. Good, with the step. Good, Drew. Good start. Eric, will the arms have more weight as they raise up? Lift to crash, lift to crash. See, the whole body is drawing to sink, drawing to sink. There you go. Very nice leg. As you take that step behind, Blake, as you come through here, make sure you make room for the hands to clear that hip. It's a really common thing in the beginning. As you step, for the hands to come right into the side. So just make sure that figure eight doesn't lose anything in that transition from side to side. As I come up, I'm rolling through, then this hip clears, and that way, I always have that space to move around. Good, Mom. Slightly wider stance. And that way, as you step behind, it's a little bit deeper step, and you can turn yourself around and clear. Good. Everyone shake it out for a second. Are there any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yes.
So I feel like right now I'm lifting and I can feel that lift in my hip. And
Right.
I'm trying to kind of pivot around that and then just sink into it. Otherwise, I completely lose it, the figure eight in the rotation.
Totally. So Rachel, come back for me for a second.
Yeah.
Have that roll. Here's that lift. Here's that turn in you were talking about.
Yeah.
That turn in preps me for the step behind.
Yeah.
And now as I continue that turn, this heel starts turning into.
Yeah.
The weight then comes to that leg as the hand slice.
Okay.
And let's try a couple of those nice and slow. So again, as I lift, the hip turns. That gives me space to step behind. The other heel comes to the ground. And as soon as that pivoting heel comes to the ground, I pull into that leg and clear my base.
Okay.
Okay, let's do two more of those real quick. So from that slice, round, lift, turn, step behind, pivot with that slice.
Wow, cool.
Okay?
Yeah.
Does that help a little bit?
So much.
So see, the trick is just not to lose your figure eight, right? Everything builds off that base. And it's one of the few factors I found that's really unifying between styles. That, the foot grab, the belly draw, and the neck lift are pretty much more than half the list of the unifying factors I've identified in the last year in Beijing. You know, there aren't that many things that all the styles agree upon, but those seem pretty central as, you know, thesis statements to a lot of the movement arts. Awesome.
When you're pivoting on your heel,
Yes.
is that where at that moment that's the weight transfers going then to from the heel to the other leg?
Right. So as I'm here, like, so there's the slice to slice. As I lift, there's the turn in of that first hip, step behind, and see how that step behind pivots first. That pulls my weight across, so I pivot the second heel, As soon as that foot finds ground, it grabs, toes grabbing the ground, and that immediately resets me in my figure eight. So it's the turn to engagement of that final foot that continues the arc of that constant rotation.
Okay.
Does that clarify?
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Great questions. It's really tricksy to take the figure eight in standing to figure eight in line drill, right? And there are lots of ways of playing with this. We're gonna do a couple more of them today before we're done, but the key is just always to go back to your base. Always go back to that figure eight coil, that identifying one hip circle versus the other, is that builds, you understand the base quality builds, and everything else can kind of stack on top of that. Any other questions? Okay, let's build on this. 1 second to reset clock. All right, so let's do half an hour left, that's awesome. Let's do our roll to ward off, and then add some light stepping into that. So the base mechanic for this one is kind of similar to the hip roll, right? The arms and the legs are moving in opposite directions, great big circles. And start off with a circle kind of ridiculously big, so big that you can't help but feel the arc of the upper and the lower. The hand and the hip pass, they arc away, the hands and the hips come to the same line, draw together, make light contact, and continue on that orbit past each other. Space, drawing up. Create space, draw together. Starting off nice and slow, the first two movements, just play with creating that shape. As you add in the foot grab, belly draw, and head neck raise, the shape becomes smaller and smaller and harder to see. And so I always like to start with great big circles, because that way it's really hard to miss the central idea of what's going on here. Once that's in your body, you can make the shape as small as is comfortable and consistent. Changing directions. Again, very, very large arcs the first few. As that becomes consistent, add in your foot grab. And notice how your legs now have less space to go. From there, add in your belly draw. And now see how the force is coming up and really innervating through the shoulders and into the arms. As you add in your head neck lift, all of a sudden, it can become a very, very small thing you're moving, but it has the same base quality of rotation as those giant arcs we started with in the beginning. In Beijing, almost everyone I've worked with starts with big circles so you can see it, goes on to small circle once the skill is there to maintain the qualities of the big. Keep playing for a second. Good. Big arc, even arc between the arms and the legs. Hey, Dad. Good, everyone has a good idea for this. So now, watch me first. What we're gonna play with here is how we break this orbit. There's an idea of internal Kung Fu that this kind of movement is like a satellite orbiting a planet. If you want to create power that leaves, you need to achieve that escape velocity to arc out of that initial coil. So as I come through here, I'm drawing to the side. My non-tape hip is going to roll. And as it rolls back, instead of rolling into that back hip is going to corkscrew into the ground. And that creates the base of my press. Once again, as I come through, the non-tape hip comes in, around, and as it comes back, I drill into that back leg, filling for that press. And notice how as that leg drills, this hand, my tape side hand, presses forward as a byproduct of that foot drilling. And so all of this is the substance of the movement. The hand here is my shield that I'm going to contact my partner with, okay? So I fill, and then press. fill, and press. Let's give this a try together. We're gonna start with some big circles. Let's do 3 of them. 1, 2, and now slowing down for 3 as the hands cross to non-tape side, pull that hip up. From here, that hip is gonna round and then drill into that back leg as I press forward. And then right back into those great big circles. 3 again, and then press. 1, 2, hands come around, roll that not tape hip. As we come back, drill tape side hip as I press. And back to roll. 1, 2, and on 3, once again, hands draw, pulling the body up, rolling that not tape side hip, drilling into that back leg as I press through. Now, from this position, if I did not have my belly button engaged, I can't really control my pelvis, right? If my feet aren't grabbing, I don't have a stable base. And so here, those postural elements become really, really significant. So once again, 1, 2, and going really slow on 3, grabbing the ground with the toes as the hip rolls. Drawing the belly to the spine as we drill into that back leg, and slowly filling that space in the arms. One more time, same direction, we'll switch sides. 1, 2, and on 3, coming through, hip draws up, round, belly engaged, as we drill into that back leg. Other side now. Let's take a few revolutions to get comfortable moving in this new direction. And now tape side on 3. 1, 2, and on 3, that tape side hip rolls forward. It rolls around and back. As it rolls back, it makes contact with the other hip, which drills and helps create our press. Same side again. 1, 2, and on 3, pulling that hip up, round that hip, drilling into the back leg as we press. Again. 1, 2, and on 3, pull that hip up, rounding tape side hip, drilling non-tape side hip as we press. As I press here, my feet are grabbing, my belly's engaged, the hand angle is here. It's not here, this puts really nasty pressure on the wrist. I want enough of an angle through here that I can smoothly deliver power without adversely affecting my joints. Again, going to the side. 1, 2, roll that tape side hip around and back, drill the other hip as we press. Now, before we go to that deep press, create a sphere in your arms, okay? From that sphere, drill into that back leg just a little more as we create a slight oval. There's almost a feeling of elasticity here, and that's what's going to snap us back around to the other direction. So we change sides. 1, 2, 3, non-tape side hip rolls around. Tape side hip drills. As I press and sink, I create that very slight oval shape, which engages my abs, engages my quads. That engagement pulls me back around as I change directions. 1, 2, 3. As I draw tape side hip up, it rolls around, drills, foot grab, belly draw, very slight oval, belly engages with that oval, and that engagement pulls me around to the other side. 2 more of these, I'll take a look at all of you. 1, 2, roll, pulling that hip up and around, drill to the back leg, slight oval, and that potential energy takes us across the other direction. 1, 2, round to fill. Keep going at this at your own pace for a few more moments while I check out all of your movements. All right, Drew, as you press, we want to create a straight line from the shoulder all the way down to that heel, okay? So I don't want to be leaning back, I don't want to be leaning forward, and I create that line by drilling that foot in the ground, by coiling around that leg, drawing the belly to the spine, and raising that head next. So it's a plumb line dropping straight down, and as I fill that, there's a slight arc to it, but it never leans at the base. One more time. Much better, much better. And the more you play with that drill as kind of the base movement that creates that back arm press, the more integrated it becomes into your center and your chest. It's a very, very good start. Good, Laura. Slightly larger base, Laura. That way you can feel that interplay of the rotation of hip to hip. When your base is here, the two hips tend to feel like one. You get a little more space, and it's easier to kind of break down and segment the body from side to side. There you go. April, play with that elasticity. Start with a sphere, and then sink and press together. It's not 1, 2, it's 1. And then as soon as you feel some stretch, identify that stretch, and then try to carry that stretch across to the other side. And see, once I start doing just a side-to-side transfer, all I'm doing is stretching, drawing that stretch, stretching, drawing that stretch. My circles can get smaller and smaller, but that stretch is the last movement of the old rotation, the first movement of the new rotation. Good, Blake. Take your time with the hand filling. The hips and the shoulders look really good. Make sure as you come around, that you play with this moment here as the hip goes from forward to back and how the whole body rotates and fills through that. There's a lot of space and very little movement through this part of the face, right? But as soon as I come through here, everything is really dense. It's 1, 2, 3. And make sure that each of those movements have space to exist, right? The hip through the belly, drilling down, and then filling as we drill down. Very nice, Lake, very nice. A little more with the umbilical draw, everything else is coming together quite nicely. There you go, that's good. That's good, yep. Now, Rachel, start to relax. You've got the movement, now make it easy. Caro, that's looking awesome. What I want you to do now, Caro, is slow down that rotation in the hips a little bit. You're getting a lot of that power, but I want if you slow it down a little, you can increase your efficiency and make it so each part of that coil becomes a part of your end result. Right now, you're still losing a little bit as your hips swing side to side, and you can help to reduce that by focusing a bit more on your belly draw and your foot grab, okay? But the base movement's looking really solid. Very nice, Eric. Relax that breath. Make sure that the hips are listening to the hands and the hands are listening to the hips. Your job right now is try to take care of that last little bit of erroneous movement that creeps in there, okay? Good, Galen. Slightly wider stance, Galen. There you go. So you can really feel that hip transfer as you roll to press, roll to press. Good start, Mom. So what you want to do now, Mom, is make sure your knee is protected, okay? So watch, as I roll, I come around this hip, as I drill into the ground, all I'm doing is taking one leg and coiling it down. See how I'm not falling over that knee, my hip isn't going back. I can feel every bit of that movement in my quadricep. The key to get going low in Kung Fu is not to use your knees, but to use the muscles that support them. And so as I drill down, I want to make sure that all of that is felt here. If I don't feel my leg working, it means the pressure is going in my knee and not going into my muscle. Does that make sense? Awesome. And so slow it down just a little. And as you roll around, play with that pushing into the ground with that base leg, such that the posture can maintain, and this push is a continuation of that force coming out of the ground. Much better. There you go. Yeah, the knees should always be comfortable. If the knees aren't comfortable, we need to rework our base. Okay, everyone, shake that off for a second. Any questions for me so far?
So the drilling down with that back leg,
Yeah.
more like a sinking into it. Would that be a synonym?
That would be a part of it. That's a partial, that's a part of the quality. Sinking is a bit, but as we sink, there's also a pressure, and that pressure creates the lift. And so as the weight sinks, as the yin sinks, the yang draws up and becomes part of that movement.
Okay.
And so the sinking is the first and most base thing you need to identify. But if you don't press on that foot, it becomes easy to lose where the knee is in terms of its tracking, right? And so it's a little bit of pressing into the ground. It's like, have you ever done a handstand, Drew?
Yeah.
You know how you do handstands? Pushing into the ground is the key to maintaining balance, right? Same thing here. You want just enough engagement that you're really actively relating to the ground as you draw into it.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's looking really good, man. Any other questions? Sweet. So the new bit for this one for today is adding in a little bit of stepping, okay? And we're not gonna do the full press to roll that we have in the form. We're just gonna work on moving one leg then the other, all right? And so we have, watch me first, we have this roll to press, roll to press. As I bring my hands around, that's what frees this leg up to come in and arc out. So the hands cross, and then I can fill. I can draw to that other side. As I weight this leg, my tape side leg is now free to step, hands and legs cross once, hands and legs cross twice, roll the front leg, drill the back leg, reach, step, hands and legs cross once, hands and legs cross twice, roll to press. So we're gonna go nice and slow and start playing with this together. Show as much space as I can. Okay, so let's do one to each side and standing first, and then I'll call out the marching. Okay, so begin rolling. 1, 2, and on 3, drawing around, round that first hip, drill the second back to the way, pushing on 3, 1, 2, and on 3, roll to drill. Now with the step. And so now, as the hand comes across, my weight is pulled on that tape side, which draws the other foot up. Hands and feet have now crossed once. As I step out, hands and feet have crossed a second time. As I roll that front hip, I drill my back hip, and that creates my press. From here, same thing. I now pull to that tape side. As I pull across, that draw down pulls that foot up. Hands and feet have crossed. As I step out, hands and feet have crossed a second time. As I round that front hip, I can drill it, and there's my press. Pull, draw the foot up, step, round the hip, drill back. Pull, draw that foot up, step, round the hip, drill back. Pull, together, round to step, roll to drill. pull, feet together, round to step, roll the hip, drill press. Pull, together, step, roll drill. Pull, together, step, roll drill. Pull, together, step, and drill. A couple more, then I'll check out how you're doing. Pull, tape side comes in, roll to drill. Keep playing with this at your own pace for just a moment. Very nice, Drew. Focusing on the quality of rotation in those hips. Good. So from that press, Drew, take your time. The weight transfers, pulls into that forward leg. As that weight pulls forward, it frees that back leg to come up. And this is a very relaxed, neutral position here. As I step out, everything is still relaxed, sinking on that back foot. There's still that nice, relaxed plumb line sinking down. As I roll that front hip, that draws the power back into my base. As I drill down, I can fill that to create my press. I draw the other side, pull that foot up, take my time as I step out, find that base, roll that front hip, and then the continuation of that roll is that drill in that back leg as I fill to press. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Everyone's making really nice progress with this. Good, Galen. Very nice. If there's a part that feels iffy compared to the rest for all of you, just slow it down and make that part take 2 or 3 times as long and try to identify where things are falling off. Very nice, Lake. Still is a little more focused on umbilical draw, but the filling of the arms is looking much, much better. Good, April. As you press out, paying attention to where things get slightly off long, and then using that oval, the elastic recoil of that oval to draw, pulling through the belly and roll through. There's no passive phase to this movement. There's no part where the deeper core musculature gets to take a big breather, right? It's just one direction of draw into another direction of draw. We need a break, take a full break. But so long as you're moving, the core is always engaged, always pulling you side to side, always kind of as that central ballast for all the movement. All right, any questions so far?
Yes. When I step, I feel like I'm putting all of my weight on the front leg, and then it's very hard to rotate and to move from there into the drill.
Gotcha.
So how do I deal with that?
Okay, so watch me and call it out when I get to the part you're talking about, okay? Is it here?
Right there, yeah.
Right there, great.
And moving into the next motion right after that.
Is challenging, right?
Yeah.
And so for this, we'll do this angle first. My hip is going to do that, okay? So there's a roll, and that roll carries me right back into that back leg in the vector of that drill. So I go from front weighted, I roll that hip in around, and as it comes back and in a second time, I pull the weight into my opposite leg and transfer that round into the drilling motion. Does that make theoretical sense or conceptual sense?
Yeah, I see what you're doing. I think I need to think more about rotating inward to pull back.
Right, and it's that inward part of the rotation that a lot of people skip. And I'm really glad you brought this question. Again, as I come around here, it's tempting to go from this part into the drill, but now there's this kind of empty space right there, right? And it's hard to fill that in that weight transfer. If I come around and draw all the way in, now the part of the function of this first coil has been to engage this leg. Once I feel this leg engaged by that round, then it turns from that round into the drill. And so there's no gap between the two, it's just one becoming the other. One becoming the drill. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, it does. It's challenging, but I'll work on it.
Oh yeah, this is super challenging. I mean, there's a reason this is the first movement in the form, right? This is kind of, can you do this? If you can do this, you can do Li Tai Chi. If you can't do this yet, you should probably do this some more, is the old kind of, dickish Chinese way of stating it. Which is part of why we just do so much of this.
It's important.
It is. And you see in the Bagua class too, how so much of our basic movement comes from this foundation.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
great question. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I got one, Joey.
Please.
When you're transitioning into that same movement and you're setting back into the drilling of that back leg, what's the weight transfer between front and back leg? It's like 25, 35, what do you got?
Gotcha. So, here, as I come through here, the weight back here is about 70%. It's very briefly 50-50 as I come forward. Again, it's about 70 to 80% forward. As I come back around, a brief moment of 50-50 as it goes from leg to leg. And then once again, about 70 back, about 30% front. And so the weighted leg is always at about 70. And those points of 50-50 are only there as transitional markers between weighted legs. Okay? Yeah, awesome. Great questions. Anything else? Yes?
I'm getting a little bit hung up on hand positions during the stepping.
Okay, so the hand positions, again, that big coil is a great place to start and also to go back to. Whenever you get lost, return here for a couple rotations, Laura. And then as I draw across and weight that one leg, I can take that step and see how the hands continue on that same arc, right? The circle gets a little bit smaller, but watch again. As I come around, there's that same arc in the hands. There's that same arc in the hands. The hands are still doing this at every point in the movement until I go into the press. The only change is that the amplitude of that circle decreases as the movement in my hips decreases, okay? But the vector is identical. Does that help? Awesome, awesome. Any other questions? All right, well, you all have done, yes, Kara.
I was just wondering, is there a breakdown of this one in the YouTube series?
There isn't yet, but I will try to film one of those today before I go home.
That would be awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
just the sides.
There are, what, Galen? Okay, there are breakdowns of internal versus external hip rotation in their own 5-minute videos. There are breakdowns of slicing in a 5-minute video. In the last months, we started doing isolation. I've posted a number of videos. There's 5-minute tutorials on the base elements we cover in class. They're all kind of hidden between the 45-minute daily workouts that I do. But if there's another thing you'd like to see added, like a breakdown of the roll to press, I am more than happy to film that and add it, okay? I wanna make sure that all of you have the tools that you need to go home and succeed. Also, I will probably be posting this video online, and so you'll have this class to go back to and refer to as well.
Yes, Joey, it's really helpful to have the classes because then in between Wednesday and Saturday, I do the last class and it's been very helpful.
Awesome, awesome. I'll keep that up. That's good feedback, thank you. Any other questions? Let's do a 5-minute standing and then I'll take a quick break before Bagua. Sound good? Sweet. Okay. Relaxing with those feet together. Just breathe, let your body be heavy. Rather than adjust your posture, try to feel where you are in space. Try to feel where your weight is over your feet, where your weight is in your quads and glutes and belly. Relaxed, neutral breathing. From here, slowly bring on our three main postural elements: a slight grabbing with the toes, a slight draw of the umbilicus to the back, gentle raise of the occiput. When that belly draw is going to do, let's say you have a slight lordosis like I used to have. If you draw that belly to the spine, it's going to help your hips find neutral. And what neutral is going to do is bring your quads in and help protect your knees. From here, we're going to let our weight fill the tape side hip. And then we're going to raise the non-tape side leg by drawing it from the hip, cross body to the opposite shoulder, lifting if we can with that psoas muscle. As we step out about shoulder width to the side. And then once again, just let our weight rock and find ourselves in space as we relax and sink. Again, bringing online foot grab, belly draw, and neck raise. And this time, a slight knitting of those long clavicle bones together. That knitting is going to do is very slightly concave your chest, very gently splay the scapula and convex your back. From there, as I begin to raise my arms, my body can sink. I feel the weight in my quads, my pelvis is in a line, and my arms can raise either just a little or a fair bit, depending on the body region that you're working on today. Of the three joints in the arm, the shoulder, elbow, and wrist, the elbow is the heaviest and hangs the lowest. The fingertips are gently drawing to each other cross body, further illustrating that sphere in the middle. And for these first few moments, just relax that breath and feel that shape. If you cannot feel your quads, which is a common problem early on, take your pelvis, rotate it back until you feel nothing, and then rotate it forward and sit just a little until you feel the quads engage. We don't want to tuck the tailbone. We just want a neutral spine that allows us to feel our musculature doing what it should be doing. And if all this begins to feel good, you can bring the tongue to the soft palate and the top of your mouth. Good, continue to hold. Good, space in those shoulders, like someone put their hand in the center of your chest and push in just a little so your shoulders go from neutral, just a little bit relaxed in. Very nice, Kara. Little bit of life in stretching those fingertips, not so much that they're rigid, but just enough that if they were to be pressed on, they wouldn't cave in and collapse. They're reaching and engaging without being aggressive about it. Good, back of the head and neck raising up, elongating that spine. The arms relax down as the body draws up. The hip pours once again to tape side hip, tape side leg, as we draw cross body and raise up. Slight bend in the knees as we inhale and exhale as we relax, gently pressing down. For more masculine energy, right hand over left, or feminine energy, left hand over right. Either way is fine by me. 3 rolls of the belly. Change directions. Okay. Very nicely done, everybody.